Hello there my friends, welcome to my another video. Last week we finished building this tiny 1/72 scale IS-3 from Trumpeter and I really enjoyed the assembly, so today I'm going to show you how to paint a really easy acrylic green color for your Russian vehicles. I start by priming the model in dark grey, considering that I used several different materials to create the finish that I did, namely the putty, so I cover it up with primer just to give it a singular color that we can then base all of our shades on. Now this isn't an actual primer, I would recommend getting a primer, but I don't really have money for a primer. I'm going to definitely get one someday, but for now I'm using grey color just to give me that collected appearance of the vehicle. Now that the primer is done, you may have seen me painting green camouflages on my vehicles before, but this time I decided to try something different. I again use Russian uniform as always, but I use buff to lighten up the color to a great extent. I'm making it way lighter than I usually do, just to experiment how it'll look and stuff, and I think it ended up looking pretty nice. Of course, I dilute the color with some water and then I applied onto the model in several light coats. For this tiny model it took me 6 thin coats to have a nice finish. Now here, if we miss any details with our brush, the grey primer will act as a fake shadow and the unpainted part won't be that visible, which is also nice. And as you can see, we have a really nice and matte green finish on our model. And it's nicely light as well, which will help in a little bit, you'll see. Now I give the model a slight dry brush with even lighter green color just to pick up all of the details. I would do this with white in the past, but I realized dry brushing with the same color, just lighter, is way better. Now for our tracks, they were painted in the same grey primer, but I'm not the best at painting tracks and I wanted to know what I could do to improve this effect, and I came up with a interesting technique. You see, when I paint my models, they are the tracks are usually either grey with a dry brush or brown with a dry brush, but this time I took flat brown color from Vallejo and I thinned it down as if I was going to layer it up, but I didn't layer it. I only applied one coat, leaving the grey primer from underneath shining through, and this sort of a wash or a filter, you could call it, created this really nice effect of every link having a different shade of rusty color and stuff, and I really enjoyed how this looked, and hopefully you may learn something from this. I mean, it is kind of a dirty technique, it's not perfectly colored, but as you will see, it looks very nice once it dries. Here, as you can see, the tracks look rather realistic for what they are. Now I decided to paint some of the details. Of course, the logo on the back was painted with flat brown, and all of the metallic things like the spare tracks and also the machine gun were painted with German grey from Vallejo. All of the colors that I'm using so far are acrylic, and I will keep it this way for the rest of the video. Now I give the model one more a light green dry brush just to pick up all of the details again, because I thought the last one wasn't as good as I wanted it to, so you know, you don't need to repeat this process. Now I start with chipping. I usually use sponge method for chipping, but this time I decided how about I try chipping with only a thin brush and, you know, my creativity. So I use a mix of white and German grey from Vallejo to create this lighter grey color, and I chip all of the parts that I would assume would get chipped. This vehicle in real life didn't have that much of a, you know, service life. I would assume the ones that were sent to Egypt got pretty scratched up, and even, you know, normal operational vehicles, but I wanted to create an interesting scratched up effect on the vehicle, so maybe I went a little overboard, but I really like how it looked. Also, of course, the shell impact got a lot of scratches all around them because the shrapnel would scratch the tank. I do this on the entire vehicle. Now, after the model is scratched, it's time for a pin wash. I use ammo dark gray pin wash for picking out all of the details. Now this is a pretty dark pin wash, so what I do is not put it everywhere, but make sure I only go with the wash around the details. This nicely picks up all of the details and makes your tiny scale model look bigger and more detailed than it actually is, even though it sometimes maybe actually is this detail. And it's probably one of the best techniques to change your model from a toy to, you know, a model. But of course you can build a model without it, and in the future I'll try making a model without using a pin wash just to see how it looks. Of course, considering this is also an acrylic product, I blend it with the surface around it with some water. On some vertical surfaces, if you build a Panzer IV on its side skirts or something like that in the future, and you use this technique of a pin wash, you can also try making some streaks that would create, you know, just generic, you know, weathering that would happen on a vehicle. Some people consider a pin wash a weathering, and I would agree to an extent, because it does make the model way darker and sometimes look quite dirty. Anyway, after that I also use Vallejo light rust wash to pick out some of the rusty areas, mainly the ones that I scratched, and also the shell impacts. I really like how the light rust looks on my models, and I will, you know, continue using it because it brings a nice light orange color to a model, and surprisingly it looks pretty nice. Of course, this is again blended with water to create a gradual rusty look on the metal. Some people might say that tanks don't get this rusty in the field, and I can't disagree. Some of them can be really clean even after years of service, but building models in a way is an art thing, and using rust is mainly just an artistic feature of mine that I really enjoy on my models. I think scratches and rust and weathering is one of the things that give the most character to a model, apart from, you know, figures and also stowage. Now for the last effect, I decided to not cover these really nice looking tracks in my opinion too much, so what I did was my typical buff dust wash, which is essentially thinning down buff color to almost a wash, you know, consistency, or basically a wash, and applying it on the entire lower gear and the running gear while blending it with some water. Anyway, this is going to be it for today's video. I really hope that you enjoyed it. If you would like to see more, please subscribe and hit the like button, and if you would like to support me, you can go down to the description, you can find my Patreon there. I'm really happy that you watched this video, and thank you for watching again. And for the next week, I'm just going to say, winter is coming.